Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Create's Blue Poison Dart Frog step-by-step painting instructions video. In this video I'll be showing you how to paint the Blue Poison Dart Frog using Nature Sketch Create's step-by-step painting instructions. First, collect all your materials and make sure they're ready to go. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, and don't worry too much if you think you may have made a mistake. Let's get started. Step 1, transfer the image to the watercolor paper. Make sure you tape down the transfer image to the back of the watercolor paper. Make sure you don't cover any of the lines of the transfer image when you do that. Take the graphite transfer paper. As you see, I've used this many times already, and you can use these over and over and over. And you'll want it dark side down, light side up, and just place it between the watercolor paper and the transfer image. And then you're ready to get started. Go ahead and test it out just with one line, and then holding down gently on one side to make sure nothing moves around too much. Go ahead and check that to see if it is the right color. So go ahead and flip it up to make sure it's transferring. You want to use about a medium pressure to get the transfer lines about that color. It can be a little lighter or even a little darker if you need to. And then go ahead and transfer all the lines. Just trace right over them in order to transfer them, and just relax and take your time. Don't worry too much if you make any mistakes. For the dots, I'm going to go ahead and draw right around them rather than filling them in. You can fill them in too if you want. They're going to end up being this dark color in the end, so whichever works easiest for you. Make sure to go ahead and put on a podcast or an audiobook, or maybe just some music, and relax and transfer all these lines. Once you have all the lines transferred, go ahead and hold down one edge gently and flip it up and down to make sure you have all the lines. And if you don't have all of them, it's okay, but it's helpful to have as many as you can. So just kind of flip it up and down like a flip book to see what you might be missing. Usually I'm missing a few, but I'm not. Oh, I see what I'm missing. I missed this area right under the eye here. Sometimes it takes a little while to notice. Maybe you noticed on the video right away. And I think that works. So I'm also going to outline the inner edges of this common name in order to transfer it. And I will also just write right over the scientific name to transfer it. And all these lines are optional. This is your painting. So if you don't want to have the scientific name and the common name on your painting, don't do it. You can also add on the hole punch lines here on the left if you'd like to transfer those. I'm going to leave them off right now. You can always add them another time if you end up wanting to use those to add this to your sketchbook. Now that you have all the lines transferred, go ahead and remove the graphite transfer paper. You can save that to the side for future use, and gently remove the tape from the back of the watercolor paper. And also either fold it over or take it off to reuse. Mine's not going to be able to be reused because I'm getting too much paper here and I kind of crinkled it up a little too much, so I'll dispose of that. And save your transfer image so that you can protect your image that you're painting from any hand marks or smudges while you're working on it. Take your kneaded eraser, make sure you have a clean spot, the light gray color, and remove any smudges that might have happened from the graphite transfer paper. So I had a few smudges on this, and you can also use this to lighten up some of those lines if needed as well. I like how dark they are. I'm going to be using these lines at the end to draw in the micron black ink lines. So once you put the watercolor on there, you want to be able to see these at the end as well. So now I'm ready to move on to step 2. Step 2, paint in the wettest, lightest Dart Frog Neon Blue. So use 7H Phthalo Blue, shake it up to make sure that the pigment is well mixed. Sometimes it settles at the bottom. 1, 2, just a couple drops. I'm not going to do a lot of color mixing in this lesson. I'm going to take my paintbrush and add a little bit of water, and then take what I picked up on my paintbrush and to the side and add lots of water to it to get that wet light color, so less concentrated color. I'll dab it on my towel and then test it out on my little watercolor test paper. It's still really dark, so I'm going to start another spot here, a little bit more water. Dab it off on my towel and test it out, and that looks a little bit more, still need a little bit more color, so add that there. It's a little too light, and that looks better. I like that. It looks like the wettest, lightest Dart Frog Neon Blue, and I'm going to add it to almost the entire space except for a space above the eye, the inside part of the eye, and then these very faint light areas on the leg where there's a little bit of shine and reflection. And you can just do that in one single layer. Dab it on your towel and start on just one side and work to the other so that you have a more continuous color. And pick up paint whenever you need it. Just dab it off on your towel before adding it to your painting, just to make sure you don't have too much water. And I'm just going to add this in one single layer over that entire space, reserving just the area above the eye and the legs there inside the eye. And you can work on this if you need to in smaller spaces. So now I've worked on this entire body and head, and even this part of the leg as one single space that I covered that layer of paint. And then I'll work on this as a single space, pulling the paint over it, picking up a little bit more, dabbing off my towel when I work on another space. I'm going to outline this space that I want to keep white on the leg so that I remember that that's not part I'm going to fill in, and then fill in the rest. And if you have a little extra paint, you can just move it up to the lines, or you can leave it as is. Clean off your brush and let this dry and move on to step 3. Step 3, paint in the driest, darkest Dart Frog Neon Blue. Now you'll want to make sure that it's dry and just dab it with your finger to see if it's dry. If you move your hand across it when it's wet, it'll leave large smears. So first we're going to use the most concentrated, driest, darkest color to paint in the spots. I'm going to pick some of the color, dab it off on my towel, and test it on my paper to make sure that it has enough water to move around a little bit. If it's too concentrated, that's why we add a little water in the beginning. If it's too concentrated, it will not move very well. And it'll be hard to work with. So once you have that, it doesn't have to be super dark. So this works, anything in between these two work. Dab it off under your towel after you pick some up, and go ahead and just fill in all of those spots. If you need a finer tip, make sure to just roll it on your towel when you're dabbing it off. If you feel like adding a few extra spots to this frog, go ahead and do that too. You can also go ahead and draw in over these lines on the frog's body while you're working on the spots. So I'm going to go ahead and paint in the legs with the Dark Frog Neon Blue now that I'm done adding the spots. I'm going to start with this one over here and a little bit more. It doesn't have to be super dark, it will be a little different from the picture. Add in over the toes and the foot here. Don't worry too much about getting it exact or all inside the lines. And on this leg, it's a little bit lighter on the inner parts. So I'm going to add a little bit to the outside here. And work on these darker areas. And then as the paint runs out on my brush, I can dab it to control it a little bit. On my towel, if it's still too dark, I can work this into those areas, creating kind of a natural gradient. If you still have too much paint on your brush, just dab it off onto the towel. I'm going to do the same with the other leg. And as you can see, it's a little different from the reference image, but that's fine. I forgot this line here. I'm going to add this in real quick first. It's always okay to go back and add things if needed. Go ahead and work on this back hind leg here. And adding the paint first on the outer edges where it's darker. And I still have a lot of dark paint on my brush, but I don't want it to be too dark. I'm going to just dab a little bit of that paint off and then finish adding a little bit more to those edges. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to work on the darker area on the bottom and then work up towards the lighter area on the top. So the toes and the foot are a little bit darker. Just add that in, starting one side to the other, not worrying too much if I get outside the lines. And this whole area is pretty dark. And as you can see, the paint is getting a little bit lighter as I move up. I'm gonna dab my brush off on my towel because it's just a little too dark still, and then keep going. And dab my brush off, and then keep going. There's still paint on my brush, as you can see. And I'm not adding any water, just dabbing a little bit of paint on my brush. And so that adds a little bit of a natural gradient going from the bottom to the top, getting lighter naturally, and also because I was dabbing my brush off. When you've added all that dark neon, dark frog blue, go ahead and let this dry and move on to step 4. Step 4, use a dry dark frog neon blue. So this is a color that is in between that super dark and the really light. So the dark being the most concentrated and the light being the wettest with the most water added. So least concentrated. So I have kind of a medium concentration color already in my palette. And I'm going to test that on my paper here. Make sure that it's the right concentration. It looks great to me. And I'm just going to go ahead and add it like I see in step 4's image, just in a single layer over the frog. So I'm not worrying too much about making a gradient, so if I run out of paint at any point, if it starts to get too light, I'll just pick up a little bit more, dabbing it off on my towel before adding it to my painting. And I'm working one side to the other, and if you don't do it exact, it's not a big deal. This is your painting, it's unique to you. And some of my spots might not be completely dry, so I should have waited a little bit longer. That's okay, because I'll be drawing over those with some ink at the end anyway. I got a little distracted by that, so I didn't add enough color, and I want it to be the same, so I picked up a little bit more color, just added that to that wet area to make it a little more continuous. And I'm just looking at it a little bit to make sure I added everything that needed to be added. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. This is just a sketch. Oh, and I got some paint outside of the lines, and that is fine. It's just a sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry and move on to step 5. Step 5, paint in the dry dark frog deep blue. So take the 9 cobalt violet, shake it up. You want to mix that dark frog deep blue with 3 drops of the cobalt violet. And 2 drops of the phthalo blue 7H. And mix it up with a little bit of water. I'm adding it by putting some pressure on the barrel of my water brush. I'm going to use this really dry dark color and also a slightly lighter color, so add a little bit of water, pulling some to the side. It's very concentrated. Dab it off on my towel and check it out. Well, that's a much lighter color. Even though on my palette it didn't look quite lighter. So I'm going to take some of these colors and just add it to the frog like I see in step 5's image. going to start with this lighter color. I'm going to start at the top. Adding a bit of water, dabbing it off on my towel, testing it one more time on my paper. I think it looks pretty great. And adding it to these darker areas. If it's still a little dark, go ahead and dab it on your towel. And if you make mistakes, again, no big deal. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. Pick up more paint and dab it on your towel as needed. And it's going to look darker right here because we already have some paint there. It's pretty dark. And this doesn't need to be exact. It's just a sketch. So you're getting an idea of this frog. So don't worry too much about getting all the paint in exactly the right place. I'm going to use this drier, darker color on the legs and add that dry, I need a darker, slightly darker color on the face and the head as well. Dab it on my towel. And then continue to move into the legs. And I, again, smudging a lot today, which is okay. Because this is just a sketch. That's where if I had protected it with my paper, it would have been a little less likely to have happened. Here in the leg, you're probably going to want to have a little bit more of a gradient. Add it in, and then clean my brush on my towel, and then take that clean brush over the edges towards the lighter areas. And again, adding the paint into the darkest area of the leg here on this hind limb. Not getting too concerned with accuracy again. Dabbing the brush on my towel and then moving the paint around a little bit to create a gradient. And I think I want to add a little bit more here above the eye. Feel free to add a little bit more as needed before moving on to the next step. And I think I like that, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop there, let it dry, and move on to step 6. Make sure you clean your water brush or your paintbrush out in between steps. Step 6, paint in the driest, darkest Dart Frog Violet Blue. So first go ahead and mix the Dart Frog Violet Blue by taking 4 drops of the 9H Cobalt Violet, and 2 drops of the 7H Phthalo Blue. Mix it up with your paintbrush. You don't have to add much water, just a little bit, so that it runs a little smoother on the paper. Dab it off on your towel and test it on your paper. Little test strip here. And you can use it to go ahead and just add some darker outlining to the frog. Here I had a little bit too much water, and that's okay. It's just a sketch. It's going to change each time I paint. I'm just outlining different areas to add a little bit more contrast. Make it seem a little bit more three-dimensional. Go ahead and add the darker areas like you see in the image in step 6 in your final reference images. And I think that is all that I want to add, and so I will go ahead and let this dry and move on to step 7. Step 7, adding lines. Start with the 005 black micron and just go ahead and go throughout and redraw the lines you transferred here. Make sure you don't redraw the spots this time. Go ahead and leave those for another sized micron. So you can use your final reference image or your transfer image to go ahead and redraw all those lines. And you can also redefine some spaces, like I made the back hind area a little bit different. And so I'll redraw that line on the outside rather than inside of that. And here on the mouth, turned out a little bit bigger. So I'll just redefine that as the outside. So feel free to redefine things as needed. And go throughout and redraw all these lines. After you've redrawn and redefined some lines, go ahead and outline the common name and write over the scientific name. So go ahead and use the 01 black micron to thicken some of the lines, as you see in 7A and your final reference image. So the line above the frog's eye, which I used a much darker color here in my painting this time compared to the final reference image. Each time I paint, it ends up being just a little bit different depending on my mood. Today looks like I was just a little bit messy and a little heavy-handed with the dark color, which is fine. It's just going to be a little different today. I'm adding this 01 black micron to the eye, the line above the eye, feet, legs, and the body outline. And be careful because sometimes the ink can smudge a little bit. I'm also going to use the 01 black micron to write in the scientific name again, just to make it stand out a little bit more. And I've put on all the 01 black micron lines that I want to add, so I'll go ahead and move on to the 08 black micron. I'm going to use this to fill in this common name and to fill in the eye a little bit more and thicken lines and darken some of the spots. So I'll pretty much be referring to my final reference image and my image 7B. And when I'm filling in the spots, I'm going to make sure to leave the edges a little bit blue. So I'll work from the center out to give it a little bit more of dimension and contrast. So it makes those pop just a little bit more. And now I'm all done. We're done, great job. Next you have some options. You can punch holes in this and add it to your sketchbook. You can gift it, send it to a friend in the mail, frame it for display around your house, and also share it on our Facebook fan art page. Make sure to check out the Nature Sketch Crate website to purchase future crates and sign up for our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun and relaxed a little. If you like this video, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to this YouTube channel.